Welcome back to Driving with Marley, the podcast that shapes the future of family office investments and partnerships. This is so funny. So I literally emailed you yesterday to make sure that we're good for the podcast today.
Absolutely.
And make sure you wear your tuxedo, and sent you a little image of one of my favorite movies from Step Brother with Will Ferrell and the other guy wearing their tuxedo to the janitor interview. And I said, to wear your tuxedo. And I did not think for 1 second you were going to show up today.
I asked you last night if you were wearing one too, and
I know, I feel bad now.
I figured that we'd, get it all out there.
There we go. So we've got the man, the myth, the legend, Blake Goodman with us. I'm so humbled and blessed and appreciative of your time, brother. Man, I can't even look at you seriously, but this is gonna be fun. So first things first, I know you're going to roll your eyes before we get into who you are and your background and all of that. We're going to obviously touch on the family that you've worked with alongside professionally and personally for a long time. But you get this question all the time. When you're rolling through Chick-fil-A, what's your order?
Number 2, pepper jack. Ask for a side, the spicy sandwich.
Spicy.
And have pepper jack on it. Ask for a side of ranch. I like the fries crispy, and thank you. And we are typically going with a Diet Coke, but a lot of times I like the Diet Sunjoy. The Diet Lemonade is one of the best things ever.
Right. It is. Okay, good. I'm a spicy pepper jack with the cheese, no pickle, no lettuce, tomato, none of that good stuff. Add the ranch, put it on toast.
I won't admit publicly that I also sometimes add 4 strips, but that every now and then gets its own way in there.
That's all right. Okay, good.
It depends on the level of hunger.
Well, I know you've got 5 kids. I've got 3. We are Chick-fil-A fanatics, and obviously we're going to get into the background there. So tell us, tell the audience, I've had the pleasure of knowing you now for a couple years. We're partnered professionally and personally, and man, I love you. Just showing up like this. This is just the testament of the kind of guy that you are. Blake Goodman, tell us, you grew up in Georgia. You've been all over the country. You've been with the Chick-fil-A family. Tell us a little bit about the early years of Blake Goodman, who you are, and then we'll get into what you've been doing professionally. But where'd you grow up? What was early in life? Who were your mentors? And how on earth did you get to start working with the Chick-fil-A family?
Well, it was an absolute blessing to be able to work with and for them. I'm grateful that I still get the opportunity to do so. I actually was born in New Jersey. You can tell by the accent. Lost it very quickly when we moved down to Georgia. Grew up in Georgia, ended up playing baseball, went to the University of Georgia to play baseball, got hurt before the summer of my first year, ended up not playing at all. Our chief development officer, Brantley Basinger, was actually my roommate. He was playing baseball as well, so we were paired up. And in law school at UGA as well, there was an internship that popped up on everybody's legal career services that said Chick-fil-A looking for a legal real estate intern. And I was a real estate and finance major in undergrad. So I applied for that, and they interviewed me for about 9 months for a 3-month internship. I figured, after 9 months of interviewing, I can't mess the place up so badly that in 3 months. But it was a very thorough examination. I even got a mock bill from one of my prior internships attorneys, who was a reference of mine, saying, I just spent 3 hours on the phone for you to get an internship. Here's your bill. So it's a very thorough place to get into. So I was blessed to squeak by and get to be a part of it. But Andrew Cathy, who's the CEO of Chick-fil-A now, and I had met in college. We were both excited about bringing a really relevant church to Athens, Georgia. That was a project that we met on. And that was really the only interactions we had in undergrad. But once he saw me at Chick-fil-A, he was an operator down in St. Pete Beach. He saw me at Chick-fil-A. He's like, what are you doing here? I was like, I got in somehow. He's like, oh, my HR must have messed up. And that's why I ended up becoming the chief people officer shortly after. But he ended up saying, well, I'm moving out to California. Maybe you should too. And from there, our journey together kind of launched off. Because if you think about it, Chick-fil-A knows its why really well. It knows its what, its how. There's 2 decisions they got to get right every time, and that's where and who. Andrew was the who decision on which operator would get each restaurant, and I became the where. So we got to take Chick-fil-A to 15 new states together, and That's been the story of my career. But along the way, we had 3 of our 5 children in California. Our bookends, our oldest and our youngest, were born in Georgia. I did spend almost 9 years out in California, helping establish a brand out there, and began investing with Andrew on the side after he asked me a question in 2008, which was, "Do you ever see things that Chick-fil-A should be doing that we just don't or can't?" And I said, "That's all that I see." And he said, "Start bringing them to me." And
What
I've
was
always
what was his position at that time in 2008? Was he I'm sure he was rising through the ranks at that time, or
Yeah, at that time, he was the, West region, so everything essentially west of, Texas. He was the West region, head of HR. So he was in charge of all of the operator selection for everything west of Texas.
wow.
And I was leading the real estate at the time west of Texas. And he ran into somebody who wanted to invest in a baseball bat company, in a Bible study. And the name of the brand was Marucci Baseball. If you look now, Marucci Baseball is all over, and that was our first investment together. And there's a long story to how I got to be invested in that. I don't know if you wanna go into that,
Yeah,
but
we'll get into that here in a little bit. So let me back up a little bit. So you are an intern at Chick-fil-A. You pass by design, as we know, with Andrew at UGA at some point where we're planting a church in Athens, ended up getting a legal internship, and then happened to cross paths again when he was an operator down in St. Pete Beach. At that point, going from an intern on the legal side and the real estate legal side, what happened between that and when you guys crossed paths? Were you an operator at that point, or how long were you at Chick-fil-A before that happened? And what kind of walk me through that path.
yeah. So I actually, was an intern the summer of 2003, the same year I got married. And I stayed an intern all the way through law school. So I just kept saying yes to every project that they asked, could I handle it? And, they had told me at the very beginning, they do not hire legal they don't hire attorneys straight out of law school, and I just kept saying yes until the point where I think I'm the only concession they made there to be able to go straight out of law school into practicing law in the real estate legal department for Chick-fil-A. So, only transactional focused. I wasn't on the litigation side at all.
So doing leases, and if you guys were buying or anything like that, I assume.
Contracts and leases.
Yep.
High on repeat, right? So, my personality, as you know, I'm not high on repeat, so
I don't see.
that had a time duration to it, but it was a great learning. It was a great foundation to be able to understand the depth at which to be able to negotiate from the business side eventually each of the leases and contracts that we did across the country. So,
Where was 2003? So I was a young man at that point, as were you, coming out of college. Where was Chick-fil-A in terms of, and I'd be curious your side of the perspective on the story, but in terms of growth, whether from unit growth or otherwise, 2003, was that kind of accelerating toward the peak? I mean, that was obviously 20 some years ago from where we are today. I remember Chick-fil-A at my local mall, the malls,
mhm.
zombie malls. I remember, I had a bunch of cousins up in Michigan and Ohio. They had never even heard of Chick-fil-A. And I thought that was really weird. So in 2003, I assume you guys were in growth mode, but probably not just the exponential growth that we see today.
Yeah, the average when I started was closer to about $2.2 million, and there were about 324 restaurants. They had just started going into some of the states west of the Mississippi. But you remember, Chick fil A started out in malls. So the big S curve growth for Chick fil A wasn't until, early to mid 2000s on freestanding units rolling out across the country. So I got to be a part of the team that was taking Chick fil A to all kinds of new states. Now, they had been in those states with malls. We called it seed planting, right? And on the next S curve with getting freestanding restaurants with drive-throughs rolled out. That's what I mean by new states. So, with the drive-through rollout across the country, it was really unique to see, from 324 restaurants, about 2.2 to 2.4 million. When we had a $4 million store, we were truly, truly excited. And some of the forecasts when you're going and trying to make a deal, on the land, and the forecast would say, well, it may do 1.7 million. And like there's no way that we got to be able to do more, or else I can't pay this much to buy the great site. There's always that struggle of how do you invest? Do you invest short term or do you invest long term? And A lot of what the growth was at the time was where's Home Depot, Walmart, Target, and Lowe's growing? And we'll take pad A or pad B. I didn't really have the same approach. And when you go to California, it's been built for 40 years before I got there. You can't have that approach. We're 40 years late. So we had to figure out how do we buy out a lighting store? How do we buy the drive through from Carl's Jr. or Burger King, or even we tore down a McDonald's, maybe one of my most proud moments. But um, it was really fun to see how we had to adapt in California to grow, and how that turned into how we had to grow across the rest of the country to get into the more dense areas.
So how did you take your role from, as you mentioned, on the legal side that's more repetitive? You had a framework for we're going into malls, and then maybe you were starting to dip your toe into freestanding along the way. But how do you go from that side of the business to transitioning to, really one, going outside of malls, then going to new states. And to your point, it's not the same template in those states as, go in front of the Lowe's or the Home Depot, but really, a brand new frontier. How did you get into a position to, be able to have the influence to start making those calls? And where were you pulling, your inspiration from, right? Because maybe you can talk about any real estate experience you had prior to that. We're all born with unique gifts and talents and sometimes resources, but like, how did you have the intuition to do so well in something that was relatively new at that point?
I did grow up with a dad who was in the land brokerage and land development business, so the language of real estate I knew well. And when I wanted to spend time with dad, we'd go drive and go dig a sign, and we were in the car together. So ultimately, knew the language well, but my personality, Marley, has always been, and my wife is easily beautiful enough to the eye, and even better to the soul, for you to see that I must have asked a really big question for me to be able to have a wife like that. Um, I'm not afraid to ask the questions, the hard questions, and you have to, right? It can be awkward, but my dad is from New Jersey, so I learned, you got to be direct. And in the South, that's a very unique trait. Sometimes it's welcome, sometimes it's not. But I'm on that kind versus nice threshold, and I really like the opportunity to ask somebody, would you or would you not sell, or would you not lease, that may not have a sign in the yard asking for something. So I will say I had some inspiration from a boss at the time. His name was Erwin Reed. We weren't doing well when we went out to California. Our first few stores were not performing well. He asked me to go out there when Andrew went out there, and he gave me one direction. There was no this many stores, do this or that. He said, I want to know what it takes to do business west of the five. It wasn't, go perform, here's your goals, here's this. It was go figure out, go go dig in and figure it out. Got paired up with a gentleman named John Rootley, Main and Main Inc. He's a real estate broker in Southern California and a wonderful person. And he's actually an anthropology and history major. So as we're driving around Los Angeles, I'm learning that Who Framed Roger Rabbit was an actual true story, just not with Jessica Rabbit and, Roger Rabbit cartoon style.
Yeah.
He's got an incredible history. So the history started getting put into me in that '07, '08 when nothing was happening. And because Truett is the founder of Chick-fil-A, had the foresight to say, I don't want to owe anybody $184 million when I die. He didn't want to owe any money when he died. Good for him. But in '05, he said that when everybody else was spending everything they could.
Yeah.
So we slowed growth in '05, which allowed me in '08 to really take advantage of the fact that nobody in California had any ability to do any deals, and we did. So I think there's a lot of God's blessing on that when you see that Chick-fil-A has been willing to sacrifice Sundays for multiple reasons, but most of which being let's make sure we have time to put God into this equation.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, I do want to fast forward to where you are now and what you're focusing on, but it would be inconsiderate of me to not ask the question, having the opportunity to work for an iconic company like Chick-fil-A, and that was not an overnight success, right? Like I still remember it in the malls, and I still remember my cousins in Michigan that didn't even know what it was. But obviously kind of the beacon on the hill, right now in terms of how to treat customers, how to do real estate, how to do business and life and faith led and principle led business. You know, I'm sure you had the opportunity to work with Dan at some point. I don't know how much you got to experience Truett, and then obviously currently Andrew. You know, for myself as well as the audience, I'd just be curious in terms of whether personal or professional life lessons, things that you kind of lay in bed next to your wife and say, "Dang, like this has been a fun ride, and I'm so lucky to have been able to learn X, Y, or Z from these guys in this business." Is there anything that sticks out?
There's so many things. I actually got to work with and for all three. So I will say Andrew's who I'm closest to and have always been, but his grandfather I was with when I got back from my honeymoon in '03, and he looked at me and said, "I hope your honeymoon lasts forever." And that has actually stuck with me as kind of not just a marriage principle, but a mindset. And very kind. So, one of the things that you could say to somebody in their wedding book. Um,
My mentor told me, "Don't get married at my wedding."
Different mental.
Vastly different. Vastly different.
Vastly different. And another thing that I think stuck out most for me, Truett's big quote was always, "There is no mission without margin." Um, I think if you look at what has made Chick-fil-A so successful, it's on purpose. It very much is, and it even has a corporate purpose to glorify God by being a faithful steward of all that we've been entrusted with. Uh, I know how to make money. That's never been, a concern on how do we figure out how to do well, or how do we figure out how to help Chick-fil-A do well, and now how do we figure out how to do well as score stones. But making sure that it's on purpose and tying that to why you do it makes you even better, sharper. It gives you the refining power of not just we could do something, but should we? Why should we? Um, and I like that. I felt like we could empower the mission, and there is no mission without margin by creating margin as much as possible. So, uh,
What does that mean to you? There is no mission without margin. That could be
mhm.
taken a couple different ways. What does that if you break it down, what does that mean to you?
You got to know what your personality is and what you can add value to. There's a lot of people inside of Chick-fil-A who are focused on the mission. They're focused on what do they do with the abundance that's provided. And I will say the family, being able to work for them, they're incredible people. They don't brag about it, and I'm not going to say all the things that they've done to influence so many people, not just in the South, but all across the country. They're wonderful people, and they do great things with their abundance, and always have. Um, I wanted to increase that because I saw the connection to if I actually help them continue to make more money, there's more stories like this that could come about.
Yeah.
So for me, it was very much how do I continue helping them achieve that as success versus the monetary value as success. I and I didn't feel shame in making money doing that along the way because I saw what they did with it.
What did they do?
So
Exactly.
absolutely, and the more that we got to make them, the more influence that they had. So, I think it's a very powerful combination to see, that you can be on margin focused, knowing that you're actually having a positive influence along the way.
I love that.
So,
Well, let's fast forward to where you are now, and
yeah.
obviously want to learn about Four Stones, what you guys are doing, what we're doing together. I was on the website here before, and really just peeling a couple things. If I could read it, there's a couple things that stuck out. Which, I'm sure I've looked at your website before. We're doing business together now. One of my terms that I've kind of coined is doing life and business with people that we love and trust. And the purpose and the impact is a huge piece of what we do every day. But I was kind of awestruck when I looked at the website and I said, "Oh man, like." We're aligned for a reason. Like I didn't read the website before, but now it's really hitting me. So a couple things, we believe you can do good by doing good with what you have been given. The most important thing in life is not what you do, but who you do it with. So tell us a little bit about Four Stones, the origination story there, obviously with Andrew, 2020, but then why you guys are doing what you're doing and what that means to you.
Yeah, it really actually started in 2008 when he asked me that question. Do you see things that we should be doing that we just don't? And I told him, that's all that I see. And he said, start bringing me those ideas. So I think Andrew, being the third generation of the family, has felt a need to understand how to diversify. It is a family-owned business. There's no debt. There are no partners. It's not public. So it is something that you look at, and historically, You got to make sure that you learn how to diversify along the way so that you don't just have one business with that's really tall in one industry and one sector and one country. So lots of things that we've been intentional about doing to make sure that I help Andrew figure out how to diversify. At the same time, I think that if we get down to how did it start, it was actually Andrew asking me to swing a baseball bat. It was a Marucci baseball bat. He said, "Hey, I want to invest in this company. We have one of the 10 shares. My dad and I are going to put the money into it." And I had just moved out to California, and essentially his grandpa had to sign on the note for me to be able to afford my house. So this wasn't like I had an abundance to be able to go into this investment with him. But he said, "And I want you to come into the investment." He said, "Maybe, 500,000." And I was like, "Andrew, I think I've got $5,000 that I could put into this." He said, "Well, will you at least review the documents and will you, test out the baseball bat?" Because he knew I played baseball. So I went and I hit with the baseball bat and I was like, "Well, this sucker works. This dog will hunt." He said, "What about the docs?" I said, "We got a lot of work to do." He goes, "We'll get to work." So I called the gentleman who had set up all the documents. His name's Mark Walker. He's one of the most brilliant people I've ever met. And my job, Marley, has always been to negotiate. This guy worked me, absolutely tore me apart every point up and down. I
This
called
was
it.
the Marucci side.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
So I called Andrew and confessed. I said, "I just got destroyed." He said, "What do you mean?" Like, don't we pay you to be a negotiator? I was like, "Yeah." And then this guy's so much better than I am. He's smarter. He's better at everything. He goes, "Well, then partner with him." His mentality is beautiful. He thinks of it as, don't look at that as something that could take away from the opportunity. Look at it as, how could we partner with like this and help learn? He thinks a combination of people, good people, can be an excellent, much more than just addition. And I will say that's very true. A lot of what we learned as to eventually what became Four Stones, we did together with Mark Walker. And he's anyway, his brother's Todd Walker from Boston Red Sox, and I think Mark's one of the sharpest people I've ever met. And we did a lot of investing together from '08 until Four Stones launched in 2020. But
So did you allow him to work you on those docs in an effort to then do business with him, or how did that?
no, he just worked me on the docks, unfortunately. Um, Ultimately, we got into that investment. And I will say, Andrew called a couple weeks before and said, "Hey, I asked Dad, and we'll let you in if you can put in $50,000." And I had already told him at the time that all I had was 5,000. But my grandpa had just passed, and he left me $45,000 in his will. And I called my accountant, begging him to say, "Tell me not to do this. Tell me not to do this. I need to pay bills. Like, tell me not to do this." And he goes, "You'll never have the opportunity to invest with like Andrew. You should take this as a chance." And so I took Grandpa's money and put the five that I could spare into the investment with him in Murchie Baseball, and that was the first thing we did together.
That's
So
amazing. That's so profound. And I assume that wasn't that was not an easy decision, I assume, for a multitude of reasons. One, it was your grandfather's capital that he kind of bestowed onto you. So you're putting it into one thing and something new, right? That was it sounds like it was your first big investment. And then I don't know where you were in life, but I assume you probably had a couple kids or a couple kids were on the way at that point. So the personal side of that decision with you and your wife and what was going on. But you guys obviously decided to move forward on that, and you see that as a catalyst for where you are now, it sounds like.
absolutely, it was one of those things where we had just moved to California. We had just had our second son. We had a miscarriage in between our first and second son, so we were already kind of in a difficult stage. And moving my wife out there where there was no family network, no anything, and already stressed out with not being able to afford the kind of housing prices in California, and then putting that big of an investment at the time into um, a baseball bat company that we really had no influence over, and the documents were to Mark's benefit.
That's amazing.
But ultimately, it ended up being a great investment. Marucci did a great job of rolling their brand out, and we it was a successful one. But it led to doing things together. And if you think about it, a lot of life is, who do you choose to do things with? And you had asked the question, like, who is it that you actually spend time with? It really shapes who you are. And from 2008 until 2020, our investment strategy was to be a passive co-GP investment partner with, real estate partners that I knew across the country. And I will say the very first one that we did after Marucci Baseball, we did an office investment in Marietta, Georgia, and in about 14 months got a 7x return. And I called up Andrew and I was like, I am so good at this. Just,
Yeah.
you should sell Chick-fil-A. I'm really good at this. The very next one, I think 2 years into it, we squeaked out getting a 6% return. I was like, you should fire me. I'm terrible at this. Um, he has been insanely patient with helping me understand that, the blend of those two, we did well, Blake. Right? We
Yeah.
got to think about this bigger than just each one. Now, I came from an each one mentality. Every single store had to work at Chick-fil-A.
Right. Yeah.
And every single deal we do, we look at it the same way. It's if I'm investing as if I'm investing else's money. And I need to care about it at that level that every single deal's got to work. So we will work exhaustively to do whatever we can to make something work.
Yeah. And so you guys started with a baseball bat company, then you started doing one-off investments. In terms of what Four Stones is today
Mhm.
and how you think of it, you mentioned the co-GP, being passive but with great partners. What is Four Stones today and what are you guys focused on?
Now we could have always done Four Stones within Chick-fil-A where I was still running all of new restaurant growth. But ultimately, what we realized was we were passive co-GP, and during difficult times, we didn't have the influence we needed to have to work our way through difficult problems. And I do like difficult problems. Unfortunately, chewing nails does not scare me. But we January 1st, 2020, officially launching Four Stones. We started converting more to direct. While I was inside of Chick-fil-A, while Andrew still is inside of Chick-fil-A, there's no opportunity for us to have another company. You got to remain loyal to who is paying your bills. And so Four Stones became an entity on its own versus just Andrew and I investing together inside of the company. And we've grown to make sure that we can handle direct investments. We do our own direct developments. We will make investments with others, but our intention is to utilize what we're able to bring and help it scale. Because the things that we really did learn well inside of Chick-fil-A are how do you scale, right? And how do you build to quality? Ultimately, with an operational mindset. My whole career has been figuring out how do I get 3 more people per hour on that site through that drive-through, and turning a stall 45 degrees versus 90 on a particular site could do miracles, and vice versa. Depends on the site. So, lots of ways to make sure that we think about everything we do operationally. But, ultimately, our superpower, we do now have over 3,000, almost 3,200 locations nationwide that we can just pick up the phone and call a local operator with local intelligence. We know enough about those customers to be highly dangerous, and we know how they feel about that multifamily project or how they feel about this neighborhood or why is the office building closed or do people still go to that Walmart or hotel or whatever it is. We can grab information very quickly from a really close group of people who their sole focus is that one location.
Yes. And
So
so how have you turned that into a business with Four Stones? You mentioned you guys are now direct. You've got a development team, a fantastic team that we've gotten the pleasure and opportunity to spend some time with. Tell us about some of the projects that you guys are working on now and both how you utilize your God-given talents and abilities that you've had to cultivate this unique perspective through Chick-fil-A and then with Four Stones. But now you've got that relationship to your point where you have a direct funnel into, we're a world that works on data and analytics. And there's firms out there like Placer and others now that are, tracking foot traffic and all of that. But you literally have a direct line into one of the top businesses in the world, but here in the US, in terms of understanding the demographic within that area and what's going on, exactly what you just said. So how do you take that, immeasurable opportunity and blessing and turn that into a business that, obviously is not just utilizing that Chick-fil-A data, but something that is much bigger than that.
Um, a few things we've done. One, we do have a single tenant net lease fund. Uh, that is a very easy way. It doesn't take me very long to know what a great site is. But it's a very easy way that we've been able to allocate a large amount of money towards owning a strong portfolio. More than that, what I saw over time, everybody in the world would call me and say, "Are you guys going to do that deal? Are you guys going to build over here?" The real estate is a local knowledge game. The more you know what's coming and why, the more you can get ahead of things and create value. So, we know where they're going for the next 3 or 5 years. The one commitment we made and will not play with is I will not get in the way of my former team. So I can't do that to Andrew or his family. That would be competing. So not going to hurt the hand that feeds us. But we do know when they're going to go, and so we make sure, for instance, a multifamily project we're going to build Q1 next year. We have a huge volume store right next to it, and we have 2 stores that are locating because of how fast the market's growing, all around it. So we talk to the operator. We know why so many nurses are coming to that new hospital, why they're building it. Um, it always goes back to data at the end of the day. Go back to my original comment about the broker I was saying in LA. The more I knew, the deeper I could go as to why would we want to be here versus there, allows us to make better decisions. And so we mine data really heavily in that regard on every decision we make, on each investment we make, especially on our investments and our developments. On our advisory, where we serve the family as essentially the master developer down at Trilith and Trilith Studios. And we serve a couple of other families as well on projects that they want to get involved in. Advisory is different. We can leverage the data to help them if it's relevant. But sometimes now it's just turned into what is our real estate expertise and the team that we've built to be able to do direct investments and developments versus just select the next Chick-fil-A. And a lot of the credit to that is the team that we've built. And you've met all of them, and ultimately, I'm lucky to work with them. I'm just going to say it. They're better at this than I am, and I'm grateful just to serve them. So.
How many of them? I'm curious because we get to pick our path at a certain point, and that's a huge blessing. After a certain level of success and entrepreneurialism, I've picked a lot of folks that were in my life, in a former season of life because I loved them, I trusted them, and I knew that they could do well. I know you mentioned Brantley on your team, who's your chief of development. You guys were college roommates. How many of your core staff today goes back to, old relationships versus, right now we're hiring a couple executives, for example, on our side, you know, I'd love to go out to my network and utilize that, but that can't happen all the time. So you're having to hire somebody off the street based on a resume. But talking about relationships and purpose, how many of your core team is from a current or past season of your life?
Yeah, the core really is from a lot of history. So our CFO, CIO, Greg Skronsky, I think everybody I've ever met and worked with knows how brilliant he is. He's who I wanted to be when I grew up. He was the senior when I was a freshman in college, and I've always admired him, and I've always wanted to work with him. I actually wrote a business plan in college called Four Brothers, and he and Brantley were two of the guys that I was talking about in that document.
Wow.
And I didn't realize it, but Andrew was our missing piece. Um, Ultimately, with Four Stones, Greg is somebody I knew from being 19 years old. Brantley was my roommate. And then our counsel, Sarah Brady, she and I went through law school together, and I've known her since she was 17 when I was her camp counselor as she was coming into UGA. She and my wife are as best of friends. So, inner circle wise, it's very, very close. And a lot of it has to do with we do get to serve Andrew, and they have a great name. I need to know that the people that are protecting him care as much about that as I do, and they do. And we've been blessed to be able to hire great people through each other's networks now as well. And we've expanded pretty heavily. We're about 13 people now.
That's amazing. But I don't want to gloss over something you just mentioned. So you mentioned Trilith. I wasn't familiar with Trilith until a couple years ago when I was working on a big land project of all places in New Mexico, where we owned a bunch of land. And New Mexico is kind of a burgeoning movie production hub outside of LA. But through my education in that, I got to know about Trilith and what was happening in, South Atlanta. Give us a bit of a taste for those that are not familiar. What is Trilith? How are you guys involved? And kind of give your perspective on just the vision there, because it's a little bit different than, putting a multifamily next to a Chick-fil-A in Augusta or whatever it is, and nothing dismissive about that. But Trilith, I think, is unique in terms of its vision. It's, kind of frontier, bleeding edge, just vision for what it should have been or was going to be and how it's evolved over time.
So Trilith used to be called Pinewood Atlanta Studios. Its original start was with Andrew's father, Dan Cappy. And Dan had fallen in love with the idea of the tax credits being something that they could come up with a way to provide the industry access to Georgia. So he actually made a deal with Pinewood in London. They were the marketing partner, and he asked them straight up, "Do you have a movie that could be produced?" Uh, and they said, "Yes, we have one." It happened to be Ant-Man. So it was the
I've seen that one.
beginning of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, right?
Right.
And they said, "But you'd never be able to get this built in time. We have to start production in 9 months." From that day until 9 months later, he was able to build 9 TV stages. 9
You're talking about Dan?
Dan, yeah, 9 film studios, not TV stages, as well as the offices and the warehouses and everything on property that he didn't even own at the time. It was a very,
Uh,
very quick project.
Obviously, you were involved early. Help me understand, whether it was personal or otherwise, like, what was the vision to say, "Hey, I wanna bring movie production to this existing but
That
non-existent." Yeah.
that was actually Dan. That wasn't a Four Stones project at the time.
Right, right, but do you have any
So
reflection or knowledge on, like, what was the inspiration or the catalyst for even wanting to do that?
yeah, he owned a plane, and he owned 2 hangars. And one of the hangars, when you own one plane, you don't need 2 hangars. So they were trying to lease out the other hangar, and then at Falcon Field in Peachtree City. And the second hangar was approached by a show called Drop Dead Diva, and they
Your
were paying the
favorite show.
whole. I'm to this day I might not have seen it, but ultimately they were willing to pay a whole lot more than he was expecting.
Mm.
So the impetus, and I think it goes back to his dad's quote, which was take advantage of unexpected opportunities. And he saw an opportunity to say, if they're willing to pay this much for my hangar, what else you got? So he was smart when asked, straight up in London, what else you guys have? And as they were holding on to filming Ant-Man, he went and he figured out, and he really did take advantage of an unexpected opportunity. And now 3 of the top 5 movies of all time have been filmed at what is now Trilith Studios. They reached a point where they got stuck on how to build the next set of stages to stay ahead of Marvel's need for additional stages as they were building the Avengers and Spider-Man and Endgame and all of these huge movies. They couldn't keep going. That was when we got called in. Again, go back to we like to solve really big problems
Yep.
and can. So we put the team together. They did a great job. They got the stages built. That led to multiple phases of continued development at Trilith, and then it led to what is now the town at Trilith. There's 700 homes, 700 multifamily units, and then I kept pushing them to say, "Hey guys, you're building something that's attracting a lot of attention and a lot of interest, well beyond just providing a house or a studio. We need to think about acquiring a lot of acreage around here." So we started the Trilith Land Fund with a partner, and I've acquired a few thousand acres and have now attracted the U.S. Soccer Federation to Fayetteville. And ultimately, they are wonderful people. They got the World Cup coming up next year. They have the Women's World Cup coming up in 2031. And we couldn't be more excited to be delivering their national training center and corporate headquarters at on time and under budget. So those are the 2 things I know of.
Nothing else. That's fair.
So
Well, let me pull that thread. So Trilith is an amazing project. You know, I had the pleasure of living in Lake Nona down here in Central Florida for many years. And I don't think there's a whole lot of examples. There's Trilith, there's Lake Nona, there's a handful of others throughout the country that have their unique setup, structure, and vision for what they could be. I think Trilith is obviously still in, I don't know what you would say, maybe the second or third inning of that. To your point, there's a lot of acreage. You've now got the US Soccer Federation, you've got the existing studios. I'd love to hear if you can share any more about the forward vision. But then you just mentioned the soccer federation. You know, one thing that we're really excited about and that we're working on is obviously how to drive impact through sports and specifically through the real estate component of sports and great markets throughout the country. So I'd love to learn any experience you have as you've been working with the soccer federation and how you started to maybe evolve your thinking. Obviously, you've got past, semi-professional skills in terms of playing to some degree, playing the sport, but in terms of developing real estate in and around sports, I'd love to hear your perspective there.
Yeah, we have a really unique team uh, that has different perspectives that we all bring to the sports industry itself. So, our executive vice president we hired a few months ago was an owner of of a firm before he sold and retired, and we got him after that. Who helped build the Mercedes Benz Stadium, Jacksonville Jaguars Training Center. His name's Matt Dale. He's amazing at what he does, and Brantley as well. His wife is the senior vice president of operations for the Atlanta Braves. So she's intimately familiar with all of the operations, all of the programming of not just the stadium, but everything around the Battery. We're actually moving our office November 15th to the Braves Development Company's former space inside of the Battery. Lot of connectivity to the Braves and how successful they've been with the Battery. We didn't develop that project, but knowing how it operates and how it programs, what works, what doesn't, is DNA inside of Hannah's head that she's been incredible um, at helping us understand how can we utilize that towards other projects. She's one of the sharpest people you'll meet, and it's really been a fun thing to take that to look at the opportunity to provide what the U.S. Soccer Federation was looking for, which was a home. They wanted 200 acres, and they had multiple places they could have gone: North Carolina, Georgia. Um, they were presented all kinds of incentives, all kinds of opportunities for every other location. I don't think we had the strongest incentive package. What we did have was a well thought out operational package, and that was Brantley really digging in, really understanding with the team, even Matt as well, and looking at it and saying, how is this going to be experienced? How are people going to interact here? And what they put in front of the U.S. Soccer Federation, it was really fun to see as they were literally driving on this hilly site that had to be completely flat. They saw it, and that was what I think the team's magic was, pulling that out, was showing them something visually that they had not been able to see yet on other sites. And then the connectivity to Trilith was they also don't now have to build all of the things that Trilith has already built. So to borrow the synergy of what's already built and to grow from there gives them a head start that they would not have had at other sites. And that's what I think is pretty magical about Trilith and its vision of um, uh, inspiring the story makers who uh, change the world. So um, it's a powerful combination of things to see what's coming together there, and they do. They want to be the center of media, and entertainment, and sports. Um, they don't really say kind of where, just the center of it. So, and I will say, the U.S. Soccer Federation is an unmatched, unrivaled thing inside of sports in the United States. We don't have an NFL team that represents the whole country. Right? We do have a soccer team that represents the entire country as we compete with the whole world in the World Cup. So it's exciting to see that come about next year. We couldn't be more blessed to just be a part of it with them. So
Yeah, well, if you ask some people in Texas, there is an NFL team that represents the country, but to the us, the Cowboys,
yeah,
not necessarily. Uh,
it's hard to argue with. And I will say I wouldn't argue with a Texan on that.
I don't
That's a pretty
know.
true.
Well, so I'm excited to share the fact that we've gotten to know each other over the last couple of years, and sports has obviously been something that has been um, poured into us, and we've just seen velocity in terms of our network, our opportunities, and we the same as you. You mentioned something earlier, like where can we take our unique resources and skills and amplify that with what we're doing. And so for us, the question is, how do we not be vanilla? I love vanilla ice cream, but like I don't want to be vanilla in anything that I do. I want to do things differently and with purpose and with impact. And so as we looked at sports and as we looked at examples like what you guys are doing up there with the US Soccer Federation, we said, how do we do sports and sports real estate in a way that is different and unique and impactful? And so, we're doing that now all over the country. We've got projects in Jacksonville and Charleston and, some others soon to be announced, but we're so happy to kind of be partnered with you guys in Four Stones. And you mentioned the backbone of one coming from Chick-fil-A. How do I tilt this to make it more, efficient and optimized? How do I treat the customer? How do I think about the geospatial and the data around, where to place the sites? But then, the connectivity and the great people that you have like Brantley and Greg and everyone else on the team in terms of their lived experiences and their natural raw talents and resources and the connectivity to the Braves, who, the Atlanta Battery is probably one of the best examples today of how it's done operationally on the real estate side and everything. You guys have a deep connectivity there. It's obviously not your project, but something that we aspire to do differently and hopefully better. And that's not to disparage what they've done, but to learn from them. And so I think you guys are in just an incredible position with the wide aperture of things that you're working on. Everything from Trilith to your single tenant net lease program to your multifamily, but now with sports and the partnership between Momentous, us, and you guys and Four Stones, I think we've got a real opportunity to go into some amazing communities here in the US and to make a huge impact where these are great cities like Charleston and Jacksonville that I mentioned, that maybe they do have an NFL team or maybe they don't. Charleston is one of my favorite cities in the country that doesn't have a professional team. They have a professional soccer team that we're very close with and has a blank canvas in terms of how do we take this team and allow that to be a catalyst for impact and change and memories for families, but a 365 24/7 type of operation that can really enhance the vibrancy of that community. And I couldn't think of a better partner with a better lived experience and better resources and perspective than what you guys have done. So I'm just really excited to see where that goes. And I have such a high degree of conviction that this is a lane that we're going to be so unique in the same way that Chick-fil-A was unique in how they thought about chicken and fast food and treating the customer. I'm really hopeful that our combined partnership, along with some other incredible folks, looks at something in a different way that can add just an extreme amount of vibrancy to what we're doing and to do it with purpose and impact. So I don't know if you want to share anything about how you're thinking about sports and what we're doing there, but I'm just so grateful and humbled that we're working together on that.
We couldn't be more excited either, Marley. Ultimately, we know what we can add to an equation. And again, we go back to we want to make sure that most things that we invest in that we can scale them, that there's more than the one opportunity to do it, right? And so when you think about what we're learning as we're putting the National Training Center for Soccer together, not just a cost exercise, not just the intimacy of calling it a pitch versus a field, not just how 12 feet deep on each field you have to have these kind of sedimentation layers for drainage. There's an amazing amount of depth of understanding that comes from putting a project like that together. But sports in general, let's be honest, the entire industry for real estate's been disrupted, completely disrupted. The word office is a very difficult word for people to just say, we're going to invest in it right now. Yet at the same time, there's some office that is crushing it and doing immensely well. And it has a lot to do with where is office and why. So you always got to go back to know your customer, right? And what do they want? So as customer patterns change and behaviors change, if you don't adapt, you die, right? So if you're trying to raise money to go buy and develop new suburban office, it may be difficult time. I don't think many people are doing that. But what everybody's trying to think about right now is where is office doing well and why? And it is in heavily entertainment districts that have a mixture of density a mixture of uses that have heavy entertainment venues, and it's a much more urban feel than it is, a suburban or rural shopping center. So these phases, I think I mentioned, we had the phase inside of Chick-fil-A that was malls. We had to start investing in freestanders, so we had a longer S curve there. But even, midstream as Chick-fil-A started to really take off, the family was smart enough to start asking the question, what is next? What is next? What is coming? And it's not like sports haven't always been around, but like you mentioned about the battery, is a very powerful example of how entertainment can bring people together and create a whole lot more value than just the team itself. And there's a lot of power in that combination. We see it as an opportunity to bring a lot of value to other projects and to provide things that other people can't do with just an out parcel to a shopping center or an office building that has the turkey sandwich at the bottom, but that just over time becomes uninteresting or inedible. But I think it's very powerful to provide people what they need and where they want it. And that's what I can't wait to put together is the knowing our customer really well, the data about how people are already spending money and how their patterns of traffic and behavior affect where would be a good site for team A, B, C, D, E as we do these things together. So combine that with the intimacy of the knowledge of the construction background that our team has and the projects we're working on. I really think there's a lot of value we can create for what we're joining together to do. So
I love it. I love it. Well, I wanna end things here on the professional side with you touched on what you guys are working on. We touched on Momentous and the partnership with Four Stones on the sports side. In terms of the audience, right? This is really for anyone, but primarily we have a lot of other family offices that listen. We have a lot of other investment partners and sponsors that listen in. In terms of people that are listening, what do you want to leave them with on the Four Stones side and how to think about you guys or how to partner with you guys and what you're going to be doing, over the next 3, 4, 5, 10 years. Is there anything you want to leave the audience with just on that side? Because then I want to get to the personal side for a minute too, because
yeah,
you're a dynamic person, you've got a great family and great faith. I want the audience to be able to learn on your personal side as well.
Four Stones is going to continue investing heavily. We believe long term that not just sports, which we are going to invest in heavily and develop in heavily, but we still believe in investing in for rent residential. We aren't breaking that down into just multifamily, but our portfolio is heavily weighted that way. We still believe in it. It's more about making sure that we do it in the right locations. And as we continue to grow that, our team's going to just those are going to be our doubles. That's where we're going to continue to make acquisitions and developments, probably for as long as we can foresee.
Mostly in the Southeast or where?
Yes, we're I would say Virginia to Texas focused as far as for rent residential. Um, it's a very heavy market. There's a lot of people who are good at it. We just know what we know data wise, and we know where we would like to do them. So we're very selective about which ones we're going to do because we don't always have to sell. We actually look at it as we want to potentially own these long term, and if somebody wants to pay us too much, we will sell. But we also like the ability to build the portfolio. Ultimately, as we build that portfolio, we really do think about long term applying more Chick-fil-A DNA to even how people experience their homes, how people experience living. So, having a lot of conversations about how people do that in our own communities.
Do you guys operate and manage your communities as well, or do you normally go with a gray star or a big?
Not yet.
uh,
No, we've actually partnered with RAM right now, and they've done a great job in our community so far. But we're learning, and we are partnered with them on our projects so that we can have a lot more experience with how the customers are being,
Yeah.
uh, how they're living. So what it feels like. So we actually will go a couple of times a year, and we'll actually sleep in on one of our own units to make sure to actually know what it feels like. And that comes from a practice at Chick-fil-A where I had to go work 6 weeks in a restaurant before I ever got to be an attorney at Chick-fil-A. So I had to cook everything on the menu, scrape the gum off the parking lot. I even got kicked where it hurts as the cow I mean, it was
Oh,
rough. Yeah. And 9-year-old, that's still mad. But, oh, bad.
okay.
The head came off. It was really bad.
Oh,
Blinding.
no.
Yeah, it was a bad that was a bad
You ruined some children.
I did. There was 3 girls that screamed and ran off, like,
Oh, no.
I'm probably still in therapy over that, but,
Well, I don't wanna give away your secret sauce, but I think this is always an interesting question, especially with somebody with your perspective, and as we talked about the funnel to Chick-fil-A. Are there markets, whether in the Southeast or throughout the country, that maybe not a lot of folks are it's on their radar, but that you're really, really convicted about the growth? You know, you mentioned kind of going into markets in Chick-fil-A and new frontiers and having to find the growth. You know, we've heard all the stories about migration during COVID and all of these things. Are there little known secrets that you're willing to publicly divulge that you're really convicted about certain markets or anything?
no, we keep 'em. Those are definitely the nuggets. You'll benefit, we're partnered together, but ultimately, I mean, our data, we keep very tight. It's for internal use only,
Yeah.
but, really, it's not like there's a secret sauce to the point where, we know that there is a movement towards this particular, uh neighborhood and no one else knows that. I mean, it's more amalgamating all the market data and saying, okay, these are the trends. All right. This is actually something that's declining. So would we still want to own an asset here? Would we look at selling an asset here? Would we continue to reinvest at this level in the asset here? It allows us to make better decisions just as we have that data. But more than anything, for specific site selection on our developments, it really is helpful to know what's coming, what's around it, and the team we built inside of Chick-fil-A, they know more than I could ever know myself. So
So let me pivot the last 10 minutes here and super appreciative of your time and very appreciative of your wardrobe today. And I think hopefully the audience gets a little taste of that. I mean, those thighs, your wife is a lucky woman. Look at that. Uh,
I'm lucky.
so on the personal side, look, you've got 5 kids. If you're okay with me sharing that, you've got 5 beautiful, amazing kids. You know, I had the opportunity to spend some time with one of them yesterday over the phone. You know, I've got 3 kids. Outside of the professional life that we all pursue, you know, your son asked me like, what does success look like? And it's deeply on the personal side for me. It's not professional and my family. Um, Tell me some things about you as a dad or a husband that you've learned that, let's assume that we're talking to a 23-year-old couple or a 23-year-old guy getting out of college, starting his career, but with, the woman of his dreams about to start a family. What are some things that you learned with 5 kids and a very successful marriage that would be great testament to somebody like that?
We got to all know that we're here to live, to glorify God and enjoy His presence. Ultimately, every time I fail and I venture into figuring out how I can get something or I can benefit, it's very much absent of the joy that I have when I know that I'm walking in something where I've been called to do something, led to do something, or feel the ability to be on purpose. Going back to what we talked about earlier, um, it's very easy to see, especially as you're raising children, that th- it's not all about us. And I'm 45 now. Life is moving at a way too fast pace. And the amount of time I have left is nothing compared to the amount of time that I care about my children having left. And I didn't know that sense of um, selflessness until I had my first son. And each one of my children after that added to that. So I'm one of those I push. I'm one of those go get married, go have children. I'm one of those guys because it's been a huge blessing for me to think of my wife when I think of the decisions we make, or to think of my children when I think of the decisions we make. If worse was just about me, I would have ruined my marriage or ruined my children because I would have worked myself to oblivion. But to do it, to know that I want to be able to create the space to have time with them. So we have memories together. So we can do things on purpose. So my children can meet the guys that I partner with. I find that to be much more enjoyable than I worked one more deal or we worked one more hour or um, you can be as productive as you need to be in the amount of time that you allocate to it and still be there for your wife and your children. You can't.
That's we all go through different things in life where we eventually learn that, I was humbled early in life before I had kids where I got to work with a lot of extremely successful folks, and the dichotomy of those that were successful and had an amazing marriage and strong family unit, and the ones that were sacrificing the professional status and money over that family and family unit, was a huge blessing for me to see as a third party spectator early in life and understand, look, I don't want to be that dad that misses all the practices and only shows up to one game a season and all of those things. So it's all through lived experience, I think, in some regard. How do you balance? You've got this incredible blessing and opportunity to be leading the charge for Four Stones, to be working with an amazing family, with the Kathy family, to be building your internal team, working on big projects. How do you find the time in the day to do all of that, but also to manage the life balance with your family, with your faith, and everything else? You mentioned it's intentional, but like, how do you actually tactfully do that?
Um, you have to be the one willing to sacrifice your time, your sleep. You can't ask everybody else to do it. And you catch up when you can. Ultimately, um, we always laugh inside the logistics of getting my children to all of their sports because I have an 18, 16, 14, 10, and an 8-year old. We finally got our princess. That's our most challenging spreadsheet at Four Stones is trying to figure out where my kids are at all times. And luckily now with Life 360, the stalker app, I can kind of see where everybody is. But it is a fascinating thing to try to make sure that they're all at their practices, they're all at their games, they're all at their appointments. And I couldn't do any of that without my wife. So ultimately, the team unit that we have between my wife and I, is the only way that we get it done. And I will say, you met Brooks yesterday. The um, amount of leadership he has as an 18-year-old is crazy. I was not that mature. I may not be that mature yet. I think that highly of my son. Um, he's been an incredible leader within our family that's helped us figure out how we can go get what we have to get done. We ask each other every day, parts to remind ourselves, what is the best part of your day. I always try to make sure that if they see beauty, whether it's a sunset, a sunrise, anything, they say thank you, God. Just some small reminders to make sure that what needs to be first about again we exist to glorify Him and drive in His presence. Um, we mess that up too, Marley. I mean, I get out of balance. I get out of control. And if you don't have like I said, the kind of guys around you that I've had that I've known since I was 19, who can call me out and say, hey, like, hey, focus. This is what we're about. Yeah, you got to be able to surround yourself with great people. So strategic anchors. There's a book called Stand Against the Wind. You got to know who your strategic anchors are and what they are. And if you are willing to allow great people who love you to chip things off of you that shouldn't be there, iron sharpening iron is an ugly process. It's hot. There's banging, but that's what a brother owes to a brother. You got to be willing to accept that. And so I'm okay when Brandy, especially, or anybody on my team calls and says you're being an idiot, and it actually corrects my behavior. So I think an openness to a team approach, including your spouse, your children, and your brothers and sisters around you. It's really kind of the only way I can do it, Marlon.
So I found it really fascinating. We'll leave the audience with this if we'd be willing. Again, I love learning about business, but at the end of the day, I want to learn how to be a better father and son and husband and everything on that personal side. You're putting one of your children through something here over the next 6 months, which I had never really heard about. Can you share a little bit about that and kind of the
Yeah.
structure of that for folks that have maybe a high schooler going into college, or even somebody like myself who's got an 8-year-old, but trying to take these tactful ways to be more purposeful with who and how they surround their children with great people and how they actually fulfill that in a thoughtful way.
So absolutely. My son Brooks is going to be the quarterback for the University of Cincinnati. I know you're a UCF fan.
Let's go. Let's
As a
go. I
um, so you and I will have a ball at the
Ooh,
games.
I'm
But ultimately, the way that college football is right now, um, I think call it about 18 of the 25 kids will show up in January for early enrollment, and 7 of the 25 kids will show up after they've graduated in May. The 18 kids that are coming early have a much less likelihood of getting into the transfer portal than those 7 kids. They're bonding earlier together. They're learning the offense or defense together. It's amazing the advantage they have from starting early. Private schools that typically, but the one that Brooks was at, they do not allow you to graduate early, so you can't enroll in January. So we had made a decision a while ago that hey, we're going to have a gap semester where you graduated in May and you're not going to enroll until January. So he could have been a 2025 fall recruit. We decided to kind of push it to being in 2026. And there are some schools that didn't understand it, understand why we would do this. But, having grown up inside of Chick-fil-A and seeing all the great leadership development that they're well known for and really good at, we're putting him through an executive mentoring program. So Andrew's his overall mentor and mental mentor. He has a physical mentor who's the strength coach at the University of Cincinnati. And he has a plan that he's regimented on all day and all kinds of coaches for speed, agility, strength, nutrition, everything. He's got a financial mentor who happens to be our wealth advisor who's in Cincinnati, a spiritual mentor, and he has a practical mentor. His practical mentor is our property manager at the Trilled Land Fund. Great man. And the kind of things that your wife and mine both wish we knew how to fix at the house and cars and everything like that. I looked at it and said, all right, if I have this time with my son, how can I be intentional about making sure that everything I can give him as a father, he has from me before he leaves my house? And Marley, I can't do it. So go back to what you had asked me earlier. You have to have a team of people willing to help, and you got to let them weigh in. And so these 5 men have agreed to be his mentors, and I'm spending the time with him to go through this plan, and we have interview lists that he's going through and meeting people I admire, which is why I asked him to interview you yesterday. And so he's building up a network through our network of gentlemen and ladies that he can reach out to across the country. And it could be that he's struggling with this idea. Well, he now has 3 people that are available for him to ask, hey, how can I? And if you think about it, if you go like this with a network and anything, you're not allowing what's possible when the network can actually be an exponent. So it takes us all the way back to Andrew telling me, hey, I know you got worked over in that negotiation, Blake, but learn from it,
Yes.
partner with him, and look at those opportunities of somebody being better at something as a way to join forces and partner together versus, well, I got beat, so I'm uncomfortable. No, well, just continue learning, move forward. I think Walt Disney said it best on keep moving forward. That's really all we can do. So
Wow, I love it, and thanks for sharing that. I'm always trying to take tidbits from, mentors and colleagues and partners. One thing that I learned was writing a letter to my kids every year, kind of reflecting on the last year and giving that to them when they're 18, right? So they
yeah,
get the catalog of that, and then this example. And there's so many others. I think it's being purposeful, I think, is maybe one of the themes here, is just being purposeful in life and faith and in business and doing it with who you love and trust and surrounding yourself with great people. I think is a major theme that obviously drives both of us individually. So I'm super humbled and thankful to be doing life and business with you, Blake. I'm
as we are,
excited
Marty.
to have a showing of Step Brothers as the future Trillith enterprises with you, and for you to wear this outfit again and to get some use out of it.
Absolutely.
You know who's got better thighs than you? Tim Tebow's got
Oh
some
gosh, yeah, yeah,
gas.
yeah. I'm not. I'm putting these suckers away. Yeah, you're absolutely right about
I
that.
hope you walk around the streets of Atlanta like that today. Do that for me.
No way. I'm going to change right now.
Oh my goodness. If go through a Chick-fil-A drive-through like that, that would be great. Well, I love you, brother. Thank you so much for taking the time, and appreciate you.
It is our honor. Talk soon, buddy. Thank you.
Thanks, Blake. Appreciate you.